Hi 3 and 3. In this video, we will be going through the answers to the TYS questions, the topical TYS on the chapter of atomic structure. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so let's start with MCQ first. Question 1, which properties of an electron are correct? Okay, so I'm going to say this again. I know I said this very many times, but as we do questions, always have with you your pen as well as highlighter. It's very important to also have good exam skills as well. So highlight, underline the keywords as well as the key pointers of what the question requires you to take note. Okay, so yeah, in this case they're asking you about electrons, and you need to select the option that is correct. So this one is very easy, right? So electrons are negatively charged, so for the relative charge you will have to select the one that has -1. And then relative mass, we say that electrons, they have negligible mass. Okay, so why is it negligible? Because it's only 1/1840, so that's a very small number. That's why it's negligible, very insignificant. Okay, so answer is B. Question 2, what does the nucleus of an atom contain? Okay, so this one is very closely linked to our concept on nucleon number, right? So nucleon number, which is the bigger number that is represented in the periodic table for each element, right? That number basically is a sum of the number of protons plus the number of neutrons. Okay, so based on this relationship that you can remember, that should also help you in this question in knowing that the nucleus of an atom contains just neutrons and protons only. Alright, so here answer is C. Question 3, which change takes place when an atom becomes a positive ion? So positive ions are cations, right? So the concept here is that you should know that atoms are electrically neutral because the number of protons equals to number of electrons, right? So number of positive charges equal to the number of negative charges. So if I become positive at the end, it definitely means that I must have lost some negative charges, correct? So your negative charges comes from electrons. So therefore, answer is B, an electron is removed. Okay, so you can always just think back to our common example. So we always use sodium as example, right? So sodium is 2.8.1 for its electronic configuration. So when sodium forms a Na plus cation, positive ion, it becomes 2.8. Right? How does that happen? By removing or losing this 1 valence electron. Okay, so answer is B. Question 4, they tell you that two atoms of the same element have different nucleon numbers. Which row is correct for these atoms? Okay, now if you are very familiar with your concepts, you see this kind of thing, right? Straight away you should know that this question, they are actually talking about isotopes. Okay, but even if you are not, okay, you can still figure things out based on the information that is given to you. Okay, so maybe let me explain it in that way first. So if you look at the question, they tell you that these two atoms are from the same element. Okay, so based on that information, same element, right, you can know for sure that these two atoms have the same number of protons, right? Because every element has a specific proton number, correct? Remember we say that the proton number is just like your NRIC number like that, right? Only you have that NRIC T05 something something something, correct? So likewise, every element also has its specific proton number, okay? Yeah. Then next, you should remember that for atoms, this is the relationship, right? So as mentioned just now, number of protons equals to number of electrons. Okay, so based on that, you can therefore start to work out your answer, right? So for number of electrons, it will definitely have to be the same. Number of neutrons, is different, because they already tell you it's different, right? Different number of nucleon, different nucleon numbers, but then your number of protons is the same, so the difference definitely has to be the number of neutrons. Okay, then number of protons is the same. Okay, so straight away you know answer is A. Okay, but like I said, if you know that this question is talking about isotopes, then you don't even need to think so much, right? Within 3 seconds you already know the answer, because isotopes, remember what's the definition? They are atoms of the same element with the same number of protons but different number of neutrons, right? So straight away you know the answer is A. Okay. Question 5. What are the relative charges of the particles in an atom? So electrons are negatively charged. Then neutron, just think of the word neutral, right? So it's always 0, they are neutral, no charge. Protons, it starts with letter P, right? P for positive, so protons are always positively charged, so +1. Okay, so answer for question 5 is D. Question 6. Which letter in the table represents a value of -1? So if you know that electrons are negatively charged, straight away you know the answer is A. This one is very easy. Question 7. Which row represents an ion? Okay, so back to our understanding on atoms, right? So atoms have the same number of protons and the same number of electrons. So and because of that, the charges cancel out each other, so your atoms are electrically neutral. Okay, so ions on the other hand, they are formed when either the atom has lost or gained electrons. Okay, so the simplest and fastest way to do this question will be, you just quickly scan through, you look at which row actually has different number of protons and number of electrons, right? Because that will then give rise to a charged particle being formed, which is your ion. So for instance, so knowing that, I can quickly derive my answer, right? So if you look at option A, it has 1 proton, 1 electron. Obviously that cancels out, so that is an atom. B, likewise, 3 protons, 3 electrons, so that's also wrong. Option C, 6 protons, 6 electrons, also wrong. Then you look at option D, 11 protons, which means there's 11 positive charges, but number of electrons only 10. Okay, so D, option D actually gives you a cation. Alright, so answer is D. Question 8. A fluorine atom is represented as follows. How many electrons does one atom of fluorine contain? Okay, so back to this relationship, right? Because this whole question is just talking about atom, so very simple. You just need to use this relationship. Number of protons equals to number of electrons, right? The smaller number represents the proton number, so that will be 9. So number of electrons that one atom of fluorine would be 9. Okay, so the answer is A. Question 9. The nucleus of an atom has neutrons and protons. Electrons are in different shells around the nucleus. Which statement is correct? Okay, option A. Electrons and protons have the same relative mass. That's wrong, right? Protons have a relative mass of 1, and then electrons have a relative mass of 1 over 1840, or sometimes we see 1836. Okay. B. The nucleus contains most of the mass of the atom. That's true, right? So your protons and neutrons each have a relative mass of 1, and then your electrons, which have negligible mass, they are in the electron shells, right? So therefore, yes, the nucleus contains most of the mass. Alright, so that's your answer, B. Let's look at the other options. C. The nucleus and electrons repel each other. Okay, so this part on repelling is wrong, right? They should attract, because the nucleus is positively charged, your electrons are negatively charged, so they should actually attract, not repel. So this is wrong. D. The nucleus has a negative charge. This one wrong lah. Okay, so answer is B. Question 10. Which properties of an electron are correct? So as you can see, the questions are kind of repeating. It's starting to get a bit boring. So again, electron, relative charge -1, relative mass 1 over 1836. So answer is D. Question 11. Which particles make up the nucleus of an atom? It's the exact same question. Neutrons and protons only. Okay. Okay, last MCQ, question 12. This is exciting. So here they tell you one isotope of hydrogen is represented by the symbol this one. So basically this is the isotope of hydrogen that you see in your periodic table, right? Question asks you which diagram represents another isotope of hydrogen. Okay, so this question definitely you cannot run away, right? You definitely need to know the definition of what an isotope is. So isotopes, they are atoms of the same element which have the same number of protons but different number of neutrons. Okay, so based on this definition and understanding alone, you can straight away zoom in your answer to option C or D, right? Because your answer has to reflect same number of protons, right? So in the isotope that's given to you in the question, it has one proton, and whereas for C and D, they both also have one proton, right? You can straight away eliminate options A and B because they have two protons, so that's wrong. Okay, so then now you need to decide whether your answer is C or D, right? So you use the next piece of information, which is the fact that they need to have different number of neutrons. Okay, so yeah. In this case, you can also do it in such a way. If you notice for option C, right, C has one proton, but then it has two electrons. Okay, so C definitely is not an atom anymore. It already forms the ion. Okay, in fact, it's a H minus ion. We call it hydride. Okay, yeah. Then that leaves you with option D lah. Okay, because for the isotope that's given to you, it doesn't have any neutron, so neutron number is 0, but for D the neutron number is 1. Okay, so option D would fit in very nicely to the entire definition of what an isotope is. Okay, so same number of proton again, which is 1, but different number of neutrons, because this isotope has 0 neutrons but D has 1 neutron. Okay, answer is D. Let's have a look at the structured questions. Question 1. The most common isotope of argon in the air is the following. Part A, state what is meant by the term isotopes. Okay, so this part basically is just asking you for the definition, which we have talked about in MCQ. Okay, so just very quickly, isotopes are atoms of the same element. Okay, so the underlying parts are all the essential pointers that you need to mention. Okay, so first and foremost, isotopes, they are atoms, right? We learned that there are many particles in chemistry. There's atoms, ions, molecules, compounds, what have you. So you need to differentiate them first, right? So first and foremost, they are atoms of the same element, okay, with the same number of protons but different number of neutrons. Okay, then part B, determine the number of electrons and the number of neutrons in one atom of the isotope of argon, this isotope. Okay, so number of electrons will be 18, right? Because again, if it's atom, then number of protons equals to number of electrons, so 18. Whereas for number of neutrons, we will need to take the nucleon number minus the number of protons to give us the number of neutrons. Okay, so that will be 22. Question 2, you are given the proton numbers of some elements in the table. Part A, write the electronic structure for a carbon atom. So carbon has 6 protons, right? So again, because it's atoms, so you know that the number of protons equals to the number of electrons. So carbon atom has 6 electrons. Alright, so if you see this term electronic structure, basically it's the same thing as electronic configuration. Alright, so over here answer is 2.4. So a very quick recap. First electron shell, maximum can fill 2 electrons, and then subsequent shells maximum can fill 8. Okay, so you fill 2 already, you remain with you still have 4 more. So the 4 more electrons will go to the second shell. Alright, so in this case it's 2.4. Part B, write the electronic structure for a calcium ion Ca2+. Okay, so part B, it requires you just an extra step. Alright, a bit of manipulation. So firstly, for calcium atom, it will be 2.8.8.2, right? Calcium is in period 4, so it has 4 electron shells, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you know that the calcium has 2 valence electrons because the group number is 2. Okay, so very quickly, using with the help of the periodic table, you don't even need to count the electrons. Straight away, you know that it is 2.8.8.2 for calcium atom. But question asks you for calcium ion, which is Ca2+, so meaning it would have lost 2 electrons in order to form Ca2+. Alright, and precisely it is these 2 valence electrons that calcium will lose in order to form the stable octet electronic configuration which Ca2+ has. Okay, so which is 2.8.8. So that is your answer for part B. Let's move to section B of the structured question. Let's look at question 1A. They tell you that chlorine exists as 2 isotopes. Complete the table below. Okay, so again, this question is not too difficult. So if you're very familiar that the smaller number is the atomic or proton number, and then the bigger number is the mass or nuclear number, then things are a lot easier, right? So they tell you that the atom, the first one is chlorine 35. Okay, so for that one, number of protons is 17. Okay, and because isotopes are atoms of the same element, so they are atoms, right? So number of protons equals the number of electrons. So this is also 17. As for number of neutrons, you take 35 minus 17, you get 18. Okay, then for chlorine 37, you do the same. Number of protons is equals to number of electrons. Then number of neutrons, now you take 37 minus 17, that will be 20. Part B, they tell you that the relative atomic mass of chlorine as shown in the periodic table is 35.5. You also notice that in the periodic table, this is the only element that has a relative atomic mass with a decimal place, right? Yeah, so what does this tell you about the amounts of the 2 different isotopes in chlorine gas? So this one, okay, so for chlorine 35 and chlorine 37, they are different isotopes, right, of the same element, and they occur naturally in this particular ratio, so 3:1. So that means naturally there are about 75% of chlorine 35 and around 25% of chlorine 37. So when you want to account for this difference, and when you calculate the relative atomic mass, it does actually result in a decimal point. Okay, so yeah. Question 2. The table gives information about a sodium atom and a chlorine atom. Question asks you to, part A, complete the table. Okay, so this one again is very easy. So you have to refer to the periodic table, right? So chlorine, you know, number of protons is 17. Then what else do we need to fill? Arrangement of electrons for sodium atom. This one we have seen multiple times. Okay, so this is should be very familiar to you already. Alright, 2.8.1. Part B, which 2 types of particles are found in the nucleus of a sodium atom? Protons and neutrons. Part C, draw a diagram to show the electronic structure of chlorine atom. Okay, so if you see words like draw a diagram, or even better if they tell you draw the dot and cross diagram, then obviously you have to draw this kind of diagram. Okay, so yeah, so chlorine in the previous part we saw that it is 2.8.7. So in your diagram, just make sure that you take note of the basic things, like make sure your chemical symbol is in the middle. First shell fill 2 electrons, second shell fill 8, then the last shell has 7 electrons. Okay, so your electrons need to be paired up in such a manner. Okay, then part D, describe in terms of electrons how a chlorine atom becomes a chloride ion. Okay, so as we have mentioned before, all the atoms, they want to be like the noble gases, right? Because the noble gases, they are very stable. So everybody wants to be stable. Okay, so a chlorine atom therefore will gain 1 electron to form the stable octet electronic configuration, thus forming a chloride ion Cl-, which has a 1- charge. Okay, last question, question 3. The symbols for 2 isotopes of iron are shown below. So first one is iron 54, second one is iron 57. So part A asks you, how do these 2 isotopes differ in their atomic structure? Okay, so this really goes back to your understanding of the definition of isotopes again, right? So isotopes are atoms of the same element with the same number of protons but different number of neutrons. Okay, so here they're asking for how they differ, right? So based on definition, it's the difference lies in the number of neutrons. Okay, so in terms of exam techniques, exam tips that I can share with you will be that for this kind of question, if you look at it, right, they give you specific values, specific data, so to speak. So in this case, in your answer, you definitely cannot just say that the 2 isotopes differ in their number of neutrons. Okay, then that will be too vague an answer, right? Plus anyway, they ask you how do they differ. So definitely you need to quote some values and be a lot more specific. Okay, so if we have a look at the answer, a possible suggested answer that you can write will be that iron 54 contains 28 neutrons, right? How do you get 28? You take 54 minus 26. Okay, so 28 neutrons, whilst your iron 57 contains 31 neutrons. So that's how they differ. Part B, state the number of nucleons present in one atom of the isotope iron 57. Okay, let's just say this is quite an interesting way of how they ask this question, because usually we say nucleon number, right? We don't really say number of nucleons. But that aside, it shouldn't affect the way you answer this question, right? Because if you know what is nucleon number, then number of nucleons basically is just the same thing. Okay, so answer is 57, right? The bigger number. Then part C, state the number of electrons present in one atom of this isotope of iron 54. Okay, so we are still talking about atoms, so using the relationship which is number of protons equals to number of electrons, then we can know that the number of electrons present is 26, right? Just use this number. So answer is 26. Okay, so we have come to the end of the TYS questions for the topic on atomic structure. Hopefully this has been helpful in helping you revise and consolidate the concepts in this topic. Okay, so alright, see you. Bye.